We're coming on the air with a hurricane hurtling toward the Pacific coast with an update in literally the last 30 seconds on the track of this super rare storm aimed at California, plus two more in the Pacific, one of them right near Maui. We're live there with the latest on the recovery, and our weather team is tracking what's next. Also tonight, any minute now, we're expecting to find out how far former President Trump's legal team wants to push back his federal election trial, as our team has new reporting on how his GOP rivals plan to attack him or not at next week's debate. Then, one-on-one with Democratic Senator Jon Tester of Montana, who says it's sad to see some senators shells of what they formerly were. Ryan Nobles has that exclusive, and the questions more broadly about age and ability for those who serve at the Capitol. Plus, in tonight's original, why the gifts you get or give this holiday season could get more expensive because of what's happening thousands of miles away right now in the Panama Canal. And a new front in the space race, why the moon's south pole could be the launching pad to the rest of the galaxy. That's coming up later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and quite literally in the last minute, we found out that Hurricane Hilary, barreling toward the west coast of the United States, is getting stronger. Now a Category 2, almost Category 3. We just learned it's shifting a little further west, which means it's going to track closer to Southern California. Look at this. This would be a very rare path. The big concern is not necessarily the wind, but the rain. In what's normally the driest month of the year in SoCal, you can see the numbers here. This is the amount of rain they typically get, almost none. So what is behind this? This is an El Nino year, which makes the Pacific Ocean a real hotbed for storms. Right now, you can see there are two other tropical storms swirling in the Pacific. And it was a Pacific hurricane's major winds near Hawaii last week that fanned the flames of those devastating wildfires we've been covering. Today, we know those fires have taken the lives of at least 111 people. Most of those bodies have not even been identified yet. Some families, instead of going to work in the morning or leaving for school, are instead heading to the morgue to identify loved ones as trucks carrying remains arrive. It is a grim reality there and a long road to recovery. Dana Griffin is on the ground for us on Maui with more on the wildfire recovery push. But I want to start with meteorologist Bill Cairns, who's tracking this hurricane's path. Let's talk Hilary, Bill, and that new update now just in. Walk us through it.
The Hurricane Center says how a rapid intensification is still occurring. They think it's going to continue overnight till tomorrow, and they think it will likely peak in intensity in about 24 hours from now. So the magic thing everyone wants to know is how strong will this be when it gets to Southern California. So the first thing I want to point out is this storm is big. This is not some hurricanes come in all different sizes. Some are small, some are large. This is a very large storm. Large storms that are strong, they take longer to wind down. They take longer to weaken. So that's one point of emphasis. So we're going to take this storm, for the most part, intensify. They would go up to 140 Category 4 storm, and then it slowly begins to weaken as it goes over cooler water to the north, just along the coast of the Baja. Will it make landfall or not? It's going to be right near the coast. Doesn't matter really much. And the timing, it gets closest to Southern California late Sunday. That's when the center will be the closest. There'll be a lot of heavy rain well out ahead of it, but the highest winds would be late Sunday, overnight Sunday into Monday morning. And it'll be interesting if it holds its tropical characteristics or not to be a very rare tropical storm in California. It's only happened 3 times in our recorded history. The only time a hurricane was the closest was like the mid-1800s. The last time a tropical storm did it was 1939. So this is going to be something totally unprecedented for like all of our lifetimes. And here's all our forecast models. Excellent agreement somewhere over SoCal. And I don't like the fact that over huge population centers, too, we could see the strong winds and the heavy rainfall. And, of course, we all know there's mountains out there all over the place around Los Angeles and San Diego, and high amounts of rain and wind and mountains don't mix. So here we are, 7 a.m. on Sunday. You can see it along the coast of the Baja. Here's San Diego. The yellows, the heavier rains. It looks like 9 p.m. Sunday, torrential rains over Los Angeles County all the way down to San Diego, everywhere in between, heading northwards. The storm's going to be moving very fast fast. So that's one piece of good news. It'll be in and it'll be out. But even still, with the mountains, we're going to get a lot of flash flooding concerns. We already have flood watches up for the area. And well ahead of the storm, we've already got monsoonal rain causing a couple of flash flood warnings. And this will only get worse in the days ahead. Some areas could get over 8 inches of rain. Hallie just showed how much rain typically falls in the Southwest this time of year. In the deserts, especially of Southern California, it's like nothing. Yeah. So this is going to be like off the charts. The winds are one of the questions. How strong will the winds still be? Right now, it looks like maybe 40 to 60 mile per hour gusts for areas like San Diego. But in the mountains, we could see much higher than that, maybe 80, even 80 plus. So yeah, this is going to be a huge event for Southern California. And just to give you a little compare it to something else. Yeah. The last time we had a storm that was anything similar to this was Hurricane Catherine, 1976. That killed 10 people and was $160 million worth of damage. And the population was half of what it is now in California.
It's scary to think about, Bill. We've talked about how unusual this activity is in the Pacific because this is an El Nino year. And we mentioned that storm building out near the Hawaiian Islands. What's the latest on that?
Well, thankfully, those two. Greg is going to go south of the islands. Fernanda, that storm has now dissipated to post-tropical, so we're not worried about that at all. So we're good. We're all fine. Hilary is the only concern.
Bill Cairns, thank you very much. Keep us posted, and I know you will in the days to come. Appreciate it. That brings us now to Dana Griffin, who is live for us in Maui County. And Dana, there's a state representative of West Maui, including Lahaina, who's telling the Wall Street Journal that she expects the number of dead ultimately to be several hundred people, with a number of them expected to be children. Explain that.
Yeah, we know from several residents here that children were home from school that day. We are still trying to narrow down, was this a pre-planning day or was this because of that initial wildfire early in the morning that was later determined to be 100% contained? Even the governor says that as they're going through and collecting these bodies, the only way he's able to determine the number of children is because the bodies are so small. NBC News has only been able to independently confirm that one child has died, Tony Takafui, along with his mother, Salote Takafui. So we are expecting for that number to grow. So far, we've only seen people who are in their 70s and one person in their 90s that have been identified. I've spoke with people here and they tell me that even the homes nearby us, we were about less than 100 yards away from some of the burned out homes that are now missing roofs. We are told that a lot of the elderly people stayed in this area, and there were even some Section 8 housing located behind me. We know that the Attorney General is now requesting a third-party independent review, and she writes that an independent review will ensure that all aspects of the incident, including any potential shortcomings in preparation, response, and communication, are thoroughly examined. And that's something that the people here in Lahaina and throughout Maui want to get answers to. How did this start? Who's responsible? And could this have been prevented, Hallie?
Dana, I just want to pull that out because this accountability question has been a huge one ever since it became clear the scope of the devastation in Lahaina, the town, this historic town, essentially incinerated here. So this review now that the Attorney General says that she is going to be putting in place by this third-party organization, essentially, could be critical to getting some of those questions answered. Yeah. Very critical. I mean, a lot of people are blaming Hawaiian Electric, who you can't see it on camera, but they have a crew behind us right now fixing one of the down power lines. I've been trying to tweet out photos and videos, but the internet is really spotty here, so hopefully that can make it online, social media. People are blaming the company for, one, not shoring up the grid to make sure that when wildfire danger occurs, that there's a system in place to shut off power immediately. Hawaiian Electric has said even if that was possible, that might not have been the ideal choice because so many people rely on that electricity because it fuels the water pumps. And you have people who have, certain medical needs, so that could have been devastating to them. They also say that they're not commenting on this pending litigation. They now are facing 4 lawsuits from people who are blaming them for causing this devastating wildfire. And there are also concerns that possibly utility workers blocked the main road as people were trying to exit. So those are all things that are going to be under review. Dana, I just want to reference, because if people are watching and they're wondering, wait, why is Dana wearing a mask? Air quality, a concern in and around Lahaina.
Yeah, we've been told chemicals like benzene, asbestos could be floating around as crews are down there sifting through the rubble. Hawaiian DOT is actually going to install dust screens. They're going to act like a filter, like the mask I'm wearing, so that the residents who live behind us and the people who are traveling the highway are not breathing in this toxic dust. So I'm taking precautions, wearing it all day long, even going in and out of the car, because we just don't know what's here and how hazardous it could be down the road.
Dana Griffin, live for us there on the island of Maui. Dana, thank you so much. To the mainland now, and the 2024 campaign trail, with some uncertainty building tonight over whether former President Trump will actually show up for the news conference he promised, where he said he would show evidence of widespread fraud he claims in the Georgia election he lost. Just a reminder, multiple recounts and investigations have shown no evidence of widespread fraud, which may be why the Trump team hasn't seemed to be putting any wheels in motion to make Monday's event actually happen yet. It comes as Mr. Trump's attorneys are now out of time to propose their own trial date in the federal investigation that alleges Mr. Trump illegally tried to overturn his 2020 election loss. Remember, this is how the political calendar and the legal calendar looks right now. The special counsel's hoping to start his trial January 2nd, just a few days before the Iowa caucuses. Politics, of course, is where Mr. Trump is focusing at the moment. He's hosting a big-ticket fundraiser in Nashville. You can see some of the video just into us. Attendees include Kid Rock, an ally, and, of course, the country music superstar. Garrett Hake is joining us now live from Atlanta. So in the last hour, we are hearing from the former president on Fox Business. He's laying out what he expects from his Republican allies when it comes to defending him on the legal charges. Yet another example, Garrett, of something you and I have talked about often, which is that there's a political lane and a legal lane, but in this instance, it's all one lane.
Yeah, it's all one big water slide, basically, for Donald Trump towards, he believes, the nomination and facing off with Joe Biden. He's trying to consolidate Republicans behind him at this point, basically arguing that if you're not with him in his legal struggles, you're not with him politically, and therefore you're with the opposition. In this otherwise newsless hour-long interview, Donald Trump kind of threw down the gauntlet to Republicans on a show many of them watch to be with him now or be perceived as against him later. Here's what he said.
Republicans can't let them get away with it. The Republicans have to be tough. The Republicans are great in many ways, but they don't fight as hard for this stuff, and they have to get a lot tougher. And if they don't, they're not going to have much of a Republican Party.
Hallie, there's a pretty familiar refrain there from the former president, part call for loyalty, kind of part warning that you got to be with him now. He used this very effectively after the New York indictment and really never looked back in terms of polling in the primary.
Well, this runs us right into next week's debate. It's going to be next Wednesday. We'll have special coverage, of course, right here on NBC News Now. But based on what we know on the debate stage, you will not see Donald Trump, at least from the signals that we're getting. However, there is as you well know, the spin room. He's going to have some allies in and around the event. Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Byron Donalds, as well as Kari Lake. We're also learning more tonight about how some of these other candidates plan to take him on or not, how they plan to talk about him if he is absent.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for all of these candidates, figuring out whether they're debating with or without Donald Trump is going to require a huge strategic shift one way or the other to be prepared. One of the things that we're learning about today, thanks to a posting online, is how Ron DeSantis is thinking about handling this. He took an unusual step here in which his super PAC, prohibited from directly communicating with the campaign, just posted their debate memo on the website of one of the members of the super PAC leadership team so that Ron DeSantis and his team could read it, but so could we. And what we learned is that DeSantis' strategy here is to defend Donald Trump in absentia and to try to basically, in the words of this memo, take a sledgehammer to Vivek Ramaswamy, who's kind of crept up into a second or third place close to DeSantis in some of these polls. Expect to see DeSantis then sort of try to act as Trump's wingman in absentia to the degree he can. And to the degree he attacks him, it's kind of by throwing some shade, basically saying, Trump's too weak to defend himself, let me do it now, and then try to turn on Christie, Ramaswamy, and these other candidates to at least shore up his second-place position, although it's hard for me to imagine how that does much to move him towards first, which is ostensibly the goal of running for president.
Isn't there kind of another risk here, Garrett? Does not DeSantis run the risk of potentially elevating Ramaswamy if he does keep going after him?
Yeah, I think that's right. Although in conservative circles, Ramaswamy's already pretty well elevated himself. I mean, he's not a national figure by any real sense right now, but if you watch Fox News all day long, he's on there all the time. So he's out there, and I think the DeSantis people, or at least his super PAC, have clearly made the calculation he needs to be dealt with. If this sounds familiar, this is how we ended up in the situation that the Republican Party ended up in 2016, where a whole bunch of people were fighting for second place to be the Trump alternative, while Donald Trump skated to the Republican nomination. You're starting to see the hints of a similar development or a similar strategy appearing here in 2024.
I know we'll be talking about that much more in the days to come. Garrett Hake in our next episode of Where in the World is Garrett Tonight. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being with us. So tonight, the migrant crisis in this country and the southern border is taking a toll further north, with the mayor of New York City now demanding help from the feds. He says the city's just not getting enough backup. Watch.
We're not getting the answers we need from the federal government, and we're constantly playing catch up on those who are coming in, and a large number of them are children with families.
Cities in the Northeast seeing a ton of migrants come in on buses sent from some southern border states. 2 bus loads arriving in Philadelphia in just the last 24 hours. More expected in New York in the days to come. The crisis affecting some New York City hotspots. The famous restaurateur Danny Meyer, the guy behind Shake Shack and a whole bunch of other spots, he announced he's going to have to close a couple of his restaurants because the hotel they're in is being used to shelter migrants, explaining in a statement that while they admire and respect the hotel's decision to house migrants, it leaves them short on paying customers for the restaurants. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is covering all of this for us. So, listen, local level, New York is seeing this crisis grow. Federal level, this continues to be something that is an issue for President Biden, for his administration. Talk to us, as you've been doing so much reporting on this, as to what you see and hear on the ground, Gabe.
Hi there, Hallie. Well, yes, this has been escalating over the last couple of months. We have heard repeatedly from Eric Adams. The sound you just played is something that he has said over and over again, blaming the Biden administration for not doing enough to help New York City. But now it is reaching a breaking point. Some of the video you're seeing there, that's outside of the Roosevelt Hotel. We were there yesterday and today, and that's an iconic hotel in Midtown Manhattan. Just this morning, I was speaking with a business owner of a business right there on the ground floor, a jeweler, who says his business has dropped by 50% in the last few weeks since those migrants have been staying there, hundreds of them, and he's worried. The video you're seeing there is from several weeks ago, where migrants were outside of that hotel on the sidewalk, and the Adams administration has been asking for help. Now there's this rift between the city and the state. The governor's attorney sending a letter saying that the city has been slow to act. The governor and the mayor have both been walking back that tension over the last 24 hours or so. But we've been speaking with some of the migrants there on the ground outside of the Roosevelt Hotel. Take a listen to what Carla from Ecuador told us.
Well, I can't say no or yes because we are immigrants and the government is helping us. The mayor helps us immigrants a lot, but immigrants too, we should be conscious and work. That's why we came here.
The migrants that we were speaking with, Hallie, say that New York City, unlike other places in this country, is very welcoming. Of course, by law, the city is required to offer temporary housing to anyone who asks for it, and the mayor says it puts them in a very precarious position.
Gabe Gutierrez live for us with all of those developments. Gabe, it's always good to see you. Thank you so much. In just the last few hours, a judge in Mississippi is declaring a mistrial in the case of 2 white men accused of chasing and shooting a black FedEx driver last year. The reason for the mistrial, apparently a key witness who is a police detective on the case said under oath he did not hand over key evidence. This was explosive in the courtroom. Here's the deal. Last year, DeMontario Gibson had been in a van dropping off a package at a house when prosecutors say Gregory Case used a pickup truck to block Gibson's van from leaving. Then Case's son allegedly came out with a gun and shot at Gibson as he was trying to leave. Gibson was not heard. A lawyer for Gregory Case says his client was worried when he saw a van outside his mother-in-law's home and went to go check it out. Gibson's family getting visibly upset at the decision in court. His mom had to be walked out of the courtroom. Danny Savalos is joining us now. This case has drawn a lot of comparisons, Danny, to the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, the black man who was shot and killed by 3 white men while running through a Georgia neighborhood. In this instance, you have this case, different circumstances, of course, ending in a mistrial. How unusual is it for something like this to happen? We obviously saw the reaction in court from Gibson's family.
Mistrials do happen, and they can happen for so many different reasons. It can be the defense's fault. It can be the prosecutor's fault. It can be nobody's fault. Sometimes something just happens or a witness blurts something out unexpectedly that prejudices the case so much that a mistrial must be ordered. But I would say it is relatively rare for the police and the state to be at fault, and that fault warrants a mistrial. Here it's the police that apparently didn't turn over evidence to not only the defense, but to the prosecution to turn over to the defense. So both the state and the defense were blindsided by this missing evidence that came out on the stand. Generally, though, a mistrial, when the defense asks for it, there's no double jeopardy. The state can try the case again.
Well, that was my question of where this goes, because an attorney for Gibson later in a statement to our local NBC station said they're frustrated and that this mistrial represents a delay in justice. You see it there for Gibson and his family. Is this a big setback? Put that into perspective for us.
It is a setback in the sense that if the state decides to prosecute again, then they have to prosecute again. And they are going to be subject to whatever available date the court has. Normally, mistrials are scheduled relatively quickly, but the reality, especially in state court, is that the dockets are clogged, and they may not be able to get everybody in for a trial as soon as they would like. So a mistrial is always a setback. But, I mean, the family should consider also, they shouldn't assume the state is going to rebring this case. It looks like they might. This seems to be a police hiccup that they can remedy in the next case. But in all likelihood, this case will be tried again and relatively soon compared to other cases.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much. Police in North Dakota are revealing some new body cam footage today showing the moments an ambush unfolded that left one police officer dead and two other officers and a bystander hurt. It's an attack officials say could have been a lot worse if police hadn't responded the way they did. We're going to show you the footage once. It may be difficult to watch. We should also note that Fargo police blurred some of the graphic parts of this video. Here it is.
Central, shots fired. Shots fired. We got 3 officers down.
3 officers down, they say. You hear officers and the shooter firing back and forth at each other. Police say Mohammed Barakat shot dozens of rounds during this whole altercation. He was eventually shot and killed. Police say an investigation is still happening. If you are thinking to yourself, wow, I've been hearing a lot about COVID lately in my group chats. Should I be dusting off my COVID tests? Well, hospitalizations for COVID are going up across the country. Perspective check. This is not like the worst days of the pandemic, right? We are not back in the summer of 2020, not even close. But relative to where we've been recently, look at this. You're still seeing some spikes in places coast to coast. Kansas and Vermont see more people admitted, up 140%. You've also got spikes in Georgia, Rhode Island, Mississippi, and elsewhere. Nationally, on average, about 20% more people are ending up in the hospital with COVID than they were just in the last couple weeks. Health officials say part of this is because of a new variant dominating these cases. It's called EG5, and there's a new booster rolling out in the fall they say could provide some protection against this particular variant. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar is joining us now. So I think we can't stress enough the context here. This spike is nothing compared to what we've seen in the past, right? When pandemic hospitalizations were way up. There were 10,000 hospitalizations in the last week of July, but 150,000 we saw 1 week back in January, right? So we are not in the darkest days of the pandemic. However, this is, right, flashing forward to whatever our new normal is, I think a surge that I will tell you, even just anecdotally, I think a lot of people are talking about because a lot of people are hearing about it and hearing about, I can just tell you, daycares, that are seeing COVID cases rip through classrooms, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think we also have like a little PTSD, right, about prior surges and how horrible it was. And I think nobody wants to go back there. And I think the way you sort of said it in the lead is the right way to think about it, Hallie. The absolute numbers are not overly concerning, but it's the trend that we're following. And that's what we're really kind of keeping an eye on. Look, we have a convergence of things that's happening right now. We have waning immunity. Many of us haven't had a booster in close to a year. We have new strains that probably have a transmission advantage over prior ones. And we just are coming towards the end of a summer where a lot of people were traveling and mixing and everything. So these bump in hospitalizations really aren't that surprising. Sadly, again, for older folks and people who are immunized, immunocompromised. That's kind of the group that is the most vulnerable. Kind of what we thought in the beginning, right? When COVID first happened, we kind of said it's like flu. If you're older, you're more vulnerable. I still think we're going to ride this out. We have antivirals. We have a new booster coming, but it's something that we need to be following closely.
Talk more about that new booster coming this fall. We know that some people get vaccinated. Some people did not get the boosters. Only about 17% of people have actually had them. What's your advice? What's your expectation? Those might be two different things.
Yeah, you know what? I think the enthusiasm is probably going to be pretty lackluster. We don't have a really great track record for flu vaccination in this country. About 50% of eligible people get the flu shot every year. If we get to that with COVID, I would be really, really surprised. You know, I have a feeling the CDC is probably going to make a recommendation. We did reach out to the CDC director who spoke with Ann Thompson earlier tonight. They're probably going to make a recommendation that anyone who's eligible get it. But I have a feeling it's going to be one of those case by cases, Hallie. That's what I'm doing in the office right now. I'm not telling everyone that I think they need it, but certainly my patients who are immunocompromised and older, I do absolutely want them vaccinated with the booster this year, Hallie.
Dr. Natalie Azar, thank you so much. We'll see how that goes come the fall. Appreciate it. When we come back, something you might have in your house right now, about 1 million of them being recalled. We'll talk about it coming up in the 5 things. Plus, mortgage rates set to hit their highest level in decades. The number you should know if you're interested in buying a house, coming up. Some new questions tonight about the people who lead our country in Congress after a couple very recent, very public incidents are turning up the heat on conversations about age and cognitive ability. And in a new NBC News exclusive from Montana, Democratic Senator Jon Tester is making very clear where he stands. Listen to this.
We saw what happened with Senator McConnell. There's obviously the issues with Senator Feinstein. You know, the population of the U.S. Senate is not getting any younger. You know, how should that be addressed? And is it something that you and your colleagues need to be a little more forceful about?
I think it needs to be addressed by the voters.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the last thing I want to have happen is stay there too long. I've watched it happen too many times in my time in the Senate.
Yeah.
And it's a pitiful thing to watch. We're really good people, both sides of the aisle, really, really good people, have stellar careers in public service, really deteriorate to the point where they're just a shell of what they former were. Mm-hmm. But the voters know that. The voters know that. They can see what I can see. I don't, they know. And so they'll have to make that decision when the time comes.
You'll remember now, last month, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who's 90 years old and in her 5th term in office, seemed to need help casting a vote during a committee markup. Her staff saying the markup was chaotic and the senator was preoccupied. Then, of course, there was top Republican in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, freezing mid-sentence in a news conference last month. He was led away. His staff later said McConnell was feeling lightheaded. He came back, did take some questions that same day. McConnell is 81 years old and in a record 7th term. Ryan Nobles, who you just saw out of Montana, is joining us now. So, Ryan, I have to tell you, it is rather extraordinary to hear a sitting senator talking in part about someone in his own party and referring to people who deteriorate to the point where they're a shell of what they formerly were. I mean, again, we said he made clear where he stands. That is very clear.
Yeah, there's no doubt that he was honest about his assessment of what he's seen play out in front of him. And we obviously asked in the context of Senator Feinstein and Senator McConnell, but he's been around for other examples of members of the Senate who've also been in similar circumstances and stayed perhaps longer than some thought they should. But what I was most struck by was his solution to this problem. He doesn't think it's something that he should have a role in telling another senator when they should step down, that he thinks it should be left up to the voters and that the decision should be made at the ballot box. I even pressed him on the idea of whether or not term limits were responsible and something that should be considered in the legislature. And he said that the institutional knowledge that is gained by people that spend, quite a bit of time here outweighs the negative outcome of people that stay too long. So he definitely views it as a problem, but one that he doesn't think should be his responsibility, at least to fix as a member of the Senate, that it should be up to the voters.
Well, but pull back and talk about this push-pull on the idea idea of term limits, whether there's any energy behind something like that. And what you often hear, because I've heard it too, in years of people suggesting things like term limits for people in Congress or whatever, the idea of institutional knowledge, that does have value, right? Like, especially in a building where tradition matters, tradition counts. That's how some of these processes actually happen, the functions of government. Do you get the sense, Ryan, especially based on some of these recent incidents that we've seen, that there is any increased appetite for talking about term limits? It's this sort of situation where the people who would put term limits in place are the ones who would stand to lose the most by then not having a job because of those term limits.
Now, you hit the nail right on the head, and the answer to the question is there's just no energy in that direction. It's not something they even want to entertain. And I do think, particularly at the federal level, and the Senate is the best example of this, it's a complex institution. The parliamentary rules can make your head spin. And for a lot of these members, it takes a term or two before they really get a handle on how the process works. But we should also point out that the Senate is a 6-year term. It's the longest term of any federal office outside of the judicial courtships. And so, you know, you get elected to a third term. You've been here for a really long time. And a lot of these folks don't get into this business until they're in their 50s or 60s. So as a result, they end up being here for a long time. But there's no doubt that age is something that is just looming over this body. I mean, I joked with Senator Tester, you know, he's going to be 66 in the not too distant future. And he ranks among the youngest members of the Senate right now.
Well, you know, you talk about, Ryan, it's a factor at the Capitol, but it's not just there. You go down Pennsylvania Avenue, and of course, conservative critics have raised concerns, raised questions, they think, about President Biden's age. You asked Senator Tester about that, and I think it's important to explain the backdrop to people of this question, too. This is a senator, one of the key moderates that we're watching here come this next cycle because of the very interesting political position that he holds in a state like Montana. So talk us through how he responded to your sort of queries about President Biden on this issue.
Yeah, it's interesting because President Biden lost his state by a pretty significant number in 2020, and now they're going to be on the ballot at the same time if everything plays out the way that we think it's going to in 2024. So there is every opportunity for him to find some distance between Joe Biden and himself. And you know, the question of Biden's age and capacity, it's something that Republicans are continually hammering. This is how Tester responded to questions about that very topic.
Joe Biden, when I've been around him, and that's not every day, but when I've been around him, when I've seen him on the news, he's absolutely 100% with it. And he's got his recall, his cognitive ability, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a doc, I'm a dirt farmer, but he's fine, and he's doing a good job.
And what's interesting about this, Hallie, keep in mind, is that there's a frame of reference here for John Tester. Not only has he worked with Joe Biden in his current form as president, but he served with him here in the United States Senate. So he knows what he was and what he is now, and he still believes that he has the capacity to do the job. This is not a politically easy position for him to take, given the lack of popularity for Joe Biden in Montana. But Tester's big, takeaway from our talk with him is that he's going to be who he is, and he's not going to be worried about the political considerations, because that is what's won him elections in Montana so many times before.
Ryan Nobles, live for us there in Washington after getting boots on the ground out in Montana. Ryan, thank you. Great reporting. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the founder tonight of the Hillsong megachurch has been found not guilty of covering up his father's sexual abuse. Essentially, his father confessed decades ago to sexually assaulting a young boy, and officials in Australia said that he did not report what his dad did. He said the victim didn't want police to find out, and the court said there was a reasonable excuse for not telling officials. Number 2, Russia fining Google $32,000 over videos about Ukraine. A court said YouTube, which Google owns, didn't delete videos with allegedly false information, according to Russian news reports. This is after similar fines against Apple, Reddit, and the host company for Wikipedia. No comment from Google. Number 3, China's fertility rate dropping to a record low last year, according to new numbers from a Chinese state-backed newspaper. It says that's the lowest among countries with more than 100 million people. It comes as China's trying to bring up its birth rate with things like better child care. Number 4, mortgage rates are up for a 3rd week in a row, now the highest they've been in more than 20 years. So sorry if you're trying to buy a house, you're going to be paying above 7% on the average mortgage rate. Demand for it, unsurprisingly, is down. Nobody's racing out to try to get those numbers. It's after the Fed has raised interest rates to try to slow down inflation. Number 5, more than 1.5 million dehumidifiers under 5 different brand names have been recalled. Why? Safety officials say they can overheat, they can smoke, they can catch fire. The company that makes them has gotten reports of more than 20 fires and hundreds of overheating problems. Officials say if you've got one of the recalled dehumidifiers, unplug it, stop using it, reach out for your money back. When we come back here on the show, some developing news on charges being dropped in the Hunter Biden case. What it means for the investigation into the president's son. We're going to have a live report with our reporter scrambling to a camera now. Plus, a rising tide lifts all boats, but a falling one could mean more expensive Christmas gifts. We'll explain what's going on at the Panama Canal next in our original. Plus, later, what LA is doing to try to crack down on smash and grabs. So we've got some breaking news just coming into us here. A judge in Delaware is formally dismissing the tax charges against President Biden's son, Hunter. Now, what does this mean? It means the special counsel can now file new charges in a different district. Remember, this is after that plea deal between the president's son and federal prosecutors basically fell apart. Tom Winter is joining us now. And just to sort of gut check and plain English it, Tom, two things we love here on the show. This was pretty much the expected move. This is not a surprise, but it is significant because of what it lets the special counsel do now.
Not only was it the expected move, Hallie, but it was the move that prosecutors had to make. The very first thing they have to prove at trial is that there's some sort of a nexus to the jurisdiction that they plan on, that they are bringing the charges in. And that was not the case in Delaware. They even said that, look, bringing this here would be a kind of a fallacy. There's just no way we can bring this case forward since that plea deal that you referenced fell apart. So what can the special counsel do now? They are free to charge Hunter Biden on these specific charges or other specific charges in any other district that they feel like they have that venue, that nexus to. And the most likely places for that are going to be the Central District of California, based in L.A., where Hunter Biden was living at the time. The other option is the D.C. area. There's some potential ties there. And so they have a decision to make, really, in the coming couple of months as to whether or not they want to bring these tax charges. Separate are that pretrial diversion agreement and the idea of a potential gun charge. The judge has not made a determination as to whether or not that is in effect, so that's something that still needs to be worked out. She's accepted the withdrawal of Hunter Biden's attorney, Chris Clark, freeing him up to potentially testify about the plea negotiations to help better inform her as to whether or not she wants to dismiss that as well. So we need to wait and see whether or not she orders up a hearing and everybody's back in court. But the tax charges against Hunter Biden, as expected, as you alluded to, Hallie, have now been formally dismissed.
Tom Winter, thank you very much. Appreciate it. To tonight's original now, with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. So I know that it is still like 150 million degrees outside, but Christmas is going to be here before you know it, or at least the holiday shopping season, right? But right now, there are some big delays that are happening in the Panama Canal that could tack on numbers, digits to your Christmas holiday shopping bill. There are more than 100 ships just hanging out in the Panama Canal. They're just there waiting, chilling, because new restrictions put in place mean that fewer ships can actually get through that really important waterway. Why? Climate change. That's triggered a drought, which meant water levels have now dropped. Thus, the delay. Guad Venegas explains.
The Western Hemisphere's most important canal and the lake it sits on need fresh water. A drought affecting Panama's Gatun Lake means less water is available to operate the Panama Canal, forcing administrators to reduce the number of ships passing through.
We are managing water resources and waiting for some rainfall to come.
And why does this matter? With 40% of all U.S. container traffic coming through the canal, any delays will hit American consumers. And if things continue, it could mean pricier holiday presents this year.
You picture everything you can buy in our superstore are on the ships generally, but the cargo that's going to be more restricted is heavy stuff. You have sometimes machinery, sporting goods, home lighting, home equipment, refrigerators, all that kind of stuff.
The new restrictions come after more than 150 ships were already waiting to cross last week, much more than the usual 90 vessels. Those that do cross are required to wait less, and the wait time to get through the locks now could be as long as 3 weeks. It's also prompted some companies to find alternate shipping options, but those could be more expensive.
It'll be more if your container is forced to be unloaded in California, for example, and then railed across the country to the U.S. East Coast. That's where you would have maybe bought it for X dollars, and then it's going to be X plus 30% or X plus 40%.
Anything coming from East Asia could also go through the Suez Canal in Egypt, which would mean a longer voyage. That canal also bringing back memories of another traffic jam 2 years ago.
There's a new plan to free that massive cargo ship wedged in the Suez Canal.
That 6-day jam delaying tens of billions of dollars in goods, and it happened just as supply chains across the globe started straining, leading to a surge in inflation. Although Panama's situation isn't an emergency, things there could get worse before they get better. The canal's meteorology manager saying the high temperatures in the Pacific due to El Nino have increased evaporation in the lake and led to a weaker rainy season. Its administrator telling CNBC global warming could have real ripple effects on shipping and the worldwide economy.
We believe that climate change is going to impose significant increase in costs and transportation costs in general.
Guad Venegas is joining us now live. So, Guad, what's the solve on this? Just more rain?
Well, Hallie, if it does rain, which is not the forecast right now, then the levels would go back to normal, and then the canal could operate at its normal capacity. But the forecast indicates this could extend. If it extends through the end of the summer, that means the companies, as we mentioned in the story, have those two options. One is they can go through the Suez Canal, which would take longer, so we could see shortages, or they could go to California. But we heard the experts say that would make it more expensive. And we just got news that those restrictions, which were, by the way, originally imposed through August 21st, have now been extended through the end of the month, all through September 2nd. And most likely they will keep extending them unless the drought ends. Hallie.
Guad Venegas, thank you very much for bringing this one to our attention. Appreciate it. Coming up, some scary moments caught on camera when the engine, look at this, of a Southwest plane catches fire. Oof, what happens? Look at that later on in the local. Plus, some new rules coming to chess, changing up who can compete in some matches, even taking back titles from people who have won before. We'll explain. A new wrinkle tonight in the controversy over trans women competing in sports. But the latest organization banning them, not the one you might expect. Not even really a sport at all. It is, as you see, chess. Yeah, chess. Starting next week, the world's top chess federation will not let transgender women compete in its official events for women until what they call further analysis. That could take up to 2 years in some cases. The National Center for Transgender Equality saying the move is insulting to cis women, trans women, and to the game itself. NBC News has reached out to the International Chess Federation for comment, but we haven't heard back yet. Maura Barrett is joining us now. And Maura, the argument from some officials in other sports that was made had to do with physical differences between male and female athletes. Thing about chess, I mean, everybody knows, like, you're not, chess is not swimming, right? Like, it's just, there's a different physicality to it. So what's behind this?
Exactly. I think you'd be really hard-pressed to find anybody, even a chess master, that would argue that it is a really physical sport. And so that's why I think this news was so surprising today. And it's important to note that it affects trans men and trans women differently, no matter how they identify in that way. And so there's been a lot of pushback that we've seen and a lot of confusion in the sense. And so the organization, the International Chess Federation, issued a statement attempting to explain their stance on this. They wrote that a change of gender is a change that has a significant impact on a player's status and future eligibility to tournaments. Therefore, it can only be made if there's a relevant proof of the change provided. Now, a spokesperson elaborated that the, quote, absence of the regulations previously caused ambiguity when registering trans players to compete, but that just has caused even more confusion because there's tournaments that are going on in the near future that players are now confused about. We heard from chess master and coach Yosha Iglesias. She's also a trans woman, and she tweeted today saying that she's not sure if she's able to qualify in what official events that are going on, if she's able to play in the French Championship in 3 days or the European Club Cup that's coming up in September. Now, the organization is saying that trans women can compete in these open categories in which gender is not a factor. But either way, there's a reason why these categories were established ahead of time. And so we're seeing a lot of criticism and pushback from LGBTQ organizations, some suggesting that the new rules see the organization suggesting that cisgender men and trans women may not be as smart as cisgender men.
It's a policy that seems to specifically apply to people who transition in the future. And as you pointed out, some of the controversy stems from the fact that the rules seem to be different for trans men than they are for trans women. What's up with that?
Exactly. It's very controversial, and a lot of people are calling it out as just point-blank sexist. And so the thing is that really differs between the two groups. I want to lay it out for you here. Basically, if you're a transgender man and you're looking to continue playing, your former titles as competing as a woman would be abolished. But that's not the case for transgender women. You could keep your titles. And so I think that's a point of contention that we're seeing from a lot of people as well. And so the Federation also elaborated that if a trans man changes their gender back to a woman, that their women's titles could be renewed. And so, again, this concern about critics saying that they're concerned that women are not being taken seriously in the sport at all, Hallie.
Maura Barrett, thank you very much. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it's tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Southern Bureau, a Southwest Airlines flight near Houston. Watch this. It was forced to land after this engine caught fire. You see this footage from the ground. It shows, flames there coming out of one of the engines. Southwest said this was because of a mechanical problem. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. Out of our Western Bureau, the L.A. mayor announcing a new task force to try to crack down on smash and grabs in the city. That's after a bunch of them happened at fancy stores lately, including at this Nordstrom's in L.A., where people made off with like $100,000 worth of stuff. The mayor says the task force will have dozens of investigators, and it'll operate 24/7. And again, out of our Southern Bureau, soccer player Lionel Messi held his first news conference for his new team, Inter Miami, today. He's pretty famously media shy, but he did talk about adjusting to life in Miami and the heat in Miami. He talked about how his family was part of the decision-making process to come to the United States. He said winning Miami's first title would be incredible. Let me tell you, Messi mania has gone nowhere since he started. I mean, people are like super obsessed. It's been fascinating to watch. Still to come. Feels like everybody wants a piece of the moon's South Pole. We'll explain what's there and where the U.S. stands in this new space race next. So right now, a Russian robot is orbiting the moon. It'll do that for 4 more days and then touch down to become the first mission to ever land on the South Pole of the moon. It's a big moment. It's a moment that's part of this new space race that just keeps getting bigger and more competitive. As we speak, India has its own moon lander that's also getting close to the South Pole. And over the next few years, both the U.S. and China will launch manned missions that they hope will actually land astronauts there. Why does it matter, right? Why is the South Pole of the moon so important? It could be a launching pad to send humans further into space than we've ever been, maybe even to Mars. Tom Costello is joining us now. So context check. It's hard to get to the South Pole of the moon, right?
Yeah, it's rocky, it's remote, it's dark, it's cold, but it's icy. And ice is what it's all about right now. That is the jackpot. And that's why Russia has sent up Luna 25. Now, this is about its first mission to the moon that Russia has launched in nearly 50 years. They've never put cosmonauts on the moon, but this is, of course, a robotic lander. Take a look at the checklist, and you see right there, Luna 25 lifting off about 10 days ago or so, entering orbit, landing on the 21st, and then running experiments. They want to know for sure, is that ice? Is it water? If it is, they can potentially, and NASA could potentially, use that water to then one day use it as fuel to go on to Mars.
The space race, right? The kind of new space race. So Russia wins by getting the lander on there first. Obviously, if it lands on the 21st as expected. But is it a bigger deal if the U.S., let's say, gets there first with actual people, with astronauts?
Well, I got to tell you, NASA Chief Bill Nelson has been very, very hawkish on this. And he just said to me in an interview a couple of days ago, he thinks it's critical that NASA and the international bodies that are part of our space effort get there first, because he is afraid that China will literally get there and say, we're here first, and then lock everybody else out. Yeah. and that would be a strategic, real problem for the world, especially if we want to use that water as rocket fuel to go on to Mars one day. A lunar base is critical as part of NASA's plans to go on beyond the moon. It's also part of China's plans, part of Russia's plans, and oh, by the way, guess who's working together to build their own space base on the moon? China and Russia.
Tom Costello, fascinating stuff. We're looking forward to seeing more of it tonight on NBC Nightly News. That's 6:30 Eastern, wherever you watch your local NBC News station. Thanks, Tom. That does it for us for this hour. We've got a lot more coverage picking up right now. We are coming on the air with a hurricane hurtling toward the Pacific coast, and we are just getting an update on the track of this super rare storm aimed at California. It's getting stronger. There's a couple more in the Pacific, one of them right near Maui. We are live there with the latest on the recovery and our weather team tracking what's next. Also tonight, any minute now, we're expecting to find out just how far former President Trump's legal team wants to push back his federal election trial, as our team has new reporting on how his Republican rivals plan to go after him, or not, at next week's debate. Then we'll take you to the heart of the migrant crisis in America. New York City, the mayor there saying he's playing catch up. He wants more help from the feds. What one family is telling our team about their experience. Plus, just in from Mississippi, why a judge there is declaring a mistrial in a case that's drawing a lot of comparisons to the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. And why a transgender rights group is calling a new ban from the organization that oversees chess an insult to the game itself. That's later on in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we have just learned that Hurricane Hilary is barreling toward the west coast of the U.S., getting stronger. Now a Category 2, almost a Category 3. And look at the track here. It is actually shifting closer now, tracking closer to Southern California. This path that you see, this very rarely happens. The big concern here is not necessarily the wind from this storm, but the rain in what's normally the driest month of the year there. Look at these numbers. This is what L.A. and San Diego typically get, basically almost nothing. So what's behind all this? This is an El Nino year. That makes the Pacific Ocean a real hotbed for storms. Right now, there are two other tropical storms swirling in the Pacific. And it was a Pacific hurricane's major winds near Hawaii last week that fanned the flames of those devastating wildfires we've been telling you about. Today, we know that those fires have taken the lives of at least 111 people. Most of those bodies have not even been identified yet. Some families, instead of going to work in the morning or leaving for school, are instead heading to the morgue to identify loved ones as trucks carrying remains arrive. That is the grim reality. And the backdrop to it all, questions over accountability. How did it get so bad so quickly? We have just learned tonight that the Hawaii Attorney General wants a third-party group to look into how local agencies should have been handling this. We've got Dana Griffin on the ground live for us on the island of Maui with more on the wildfire recovery. But I want to start with meteorologist Bill Cairns on the path of Hurricane Hilary. Talk us through it. Where is it going? What's the big risk?
Rainfall, as you said. I mean, we just have to picture, we know what a hurricane can do. But I don't know if any of us in our lifetimes have ever seen what a hurricane can do where there's 10,000-foot mountains and it's arid. It's a desert. I mean, there's going to be water in places that have never seen water before when this is all said and done, and that is the threat. The threat is going to be flash flooding, mudslides, you get the burn scar areas from past fires, and you get the heavy rain. So that's going to be like all the issues we're going to be talking about in the days ahead. This is a large storm. It's not small. I mean, it's not compact. It's getting powerful and large. So it's kind of like the double whammy. The hurricanes can come in all different sizes. It will not be a hurricane when it makes it to Southern California. That is almost certain. The water gets too chilly as it heads northwards. Could it make it as a tropical storm? It is possible. It's happened 3 other times in our recorded history, and this storm has a chance. It's going to be moving fast to the north, and it's a large, powerful storm, so it may not have time to wind down and weaken enough. So we may get wind damage in Southern California, especially in the mountainous areas, from the storm alone. Then, of course, the rainfall is going to be a huge issue. So how certain are we where this is going? Arizona, your forecast is looking better by the hour. Southern California, especially the coastal areas, it's been getting worse by the hour. These are all our forecast lines of where the center is going to go. And the winds may be strong enough for some minor damage if you're near the center of the storm. Also, that'll keep the east winds. That'll be the worst if the storm goes west of you. So if you're in Los Angeles or San Diego, if you're watching this forecast, you're hoping that this storm tracks towards the east. The more west it goes, the stronger your winds will be. You're going to get rain no matter what. So let's discuss the rain. The yellow is heavy rain. The green is where we're dealing with light rain. Here's the center of the storm with these circles. The isobars are all located. So the heavy rain arrives as we go through Saturday night and Sunday in areas of San Diego. Then it pours. The real bulk of the storm is going to be Sunday evening. This is when we'll have a tremendous amount of flash flooding. This is when they'll tell residents, be off the roads, everyone be home, be safe, and try to wait the storm out. That heads up to San Diego, Los Angeles, and then into Nevada by the time we get towards Monday. Already we have flood watches that are up. These will be right through the storm. We'll already have a couple flash flood warnings. That's just monsoonal moisture ahead of this storm. It'll get worse in the days ahead. Rainfall totals will easily widespread 2 to 4 inches. The mountainous areas 8+. I've already seen mentions of 10+. And by the way, the rainfall record, the most from any tropical storm in California history, is 14 inches. We do have a chance of threatening that in some of the higher elevations. And as far as the winds go, there is going to be at least a moderate risk of tropical storm winds in LA and San Diego. Just something you just don't see much. And I have to mention the one storm we'll be comparing this to. So this is our forecast track. And here's Kathleen in September 1976, also an El Nino year. Look at how similar this path was. 10 lives were taken with that storm, $160 million worth of damage. This one could be worse.
I know you're going to be watching it, tracking it in the days to come. We will have you back, Bill, with every update. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. As we talk about storms in the Pacific, we've obviously got to talk about what happened on the island of Maui with those hurricane-force winds fanning the flames of the devastating wildfires, Dana, that just decimated, incinerated the town of Lahaina. We are now learning tonight that this wildfire will be investigated by an independent review. We keep hearing this accusation. There have been lawsuits filed now that the Hawaiian Electric Company was not proactive enough ahead of these fires. Is that something that would be a part or purview of this review?
Oh, absolutely. That would be part of it, especially this new exclusive reporting that we got from NBCNews.com that talks about a last resort. Maui's emergency management director repeatedly downplayed sirens. I want to talk about that because it's interesting when you think about the issue with the sirens. First of all, you've got Hawaiian. I want to go back first. You've got Hawaiian Electric being blamed for the fire. Now you've got the emergency management director for being blamed for not sounding those sirens. He says that he didn't sound them because a lot of times those are used for tsunami warnings, and that would have sent people for the hills, and that would have sent them right into the path of the fire. But people said that would have at least prompted them to do something, because you've got a lot of people who did not have their TVs on. They may not have cell phones, but that would have forced them to come out of their home and at least looked around. And a lot of people believe that could have saved more lives, Hallie.
When you look at what's ahead, Dana, this very long road to recovery, we are still, the people in Maui are still in the grieving process here. You have the state representative of Lahaina who's telling the Wall Street Journal she expects the number of people ultimately to be confirmed dead to be several hundreds, with a lot of them expected to be children. Just a horrific reality there. Explain that.
Yeah. Well, a lot of kids were home from school that day, Hallie, and a lot of parents had gone to work. We're still trying to narrow down were the kids home from school because of the initial wildfire that sparked around some 6 o'clock in the morning, and that, officials said was 100% contained, or if this was some sort of planning day. We've heard harrowing stories of neighbors running next door to get those kids, a lot of them running for the coast that you see behind me. So that is definitely going to be part of the investigation into everything that has gone on here. We know, based from the governor's comments, he says there are several children that have been killed. And he says when they're going around looking at these bodies that are so badly burned, the only way he can tell that they are kids because the bodies are so small, Hallie.
It's just a nightmare. It is a gut punch to think about, Dana. I have to ask, because you are wearing a mask, and I think people might wonder, the reason for that is because of the air quality concerns now, right, which are an issue for some of these responders.
Yeah, and we're not taking any chances. We've learned that there are chemicals and things in the dust that could pose long-term lung disease caused by benzene, asbestos. Even the Hawaiian Department of Transportation is planning to install dust screens, which act like a filter as if you were wearing a mask, to make sure that the work that's being done behind us isn't filtering onto the highway, isn't blowing into the homes that are also located even in higher elevations. So it's a major concern. We've heard officials equate the toxins that are involved here to 9/11, and we know so many people suffered health issues because of that, so we're taking precautions. Hallie?
Dana Griffin, live for us there on Maui. Dana, thank you. To the mainland now, and the 2024 campaign trail, with some uncertainty growing tonight over whether former President Trump is going to actually show up for the news conference he promised, where he said he'd show evidence of widespread fraud, he claims, in the Georgia election he lost. Just a reminder, multiple recounts and investigations have shown no evidence of widespread fraud, which may be why the Trump team has not put any wheels in motion to make Monday's event actually happen yet. It comes as his attorneys are now out of time to propose their own trial date in the federal investigation that accuses him of illegally trying to overturn his 2020 loss. Remember, this is how the calendar looks right now. The special counsel hopes to start his trial January 2nd. And when we're talking about trial dates, we're learning in just the last few minutes that one of Mr. Trump's co-defendants in the Georgia case, that's former Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Clark, has now become the first to push back against the schedule laid out by the Fulton County DA. So she wants a March 4th trial start date. Clark's team saying, that's not what we want. We want that basically pushed. Right now, of course, it's not the legal, but the political, where Mr. Trump's focus is. He hosted a fundraiser in Nashville, which includes people like Kid Rock, right there, an ally of the former president, and, of course, country music superstar. Garrett Hake is joining us now. So in the last hour, we are hearing from the former president on Fox Business. He's laying out what he expects from his Republican allies when it comes to defending him on the legal charges. Yet another example, Garrett, of something you and I have talked about often, which is that there's a political lane and a legal lane, but in this instance, it's all one lane.
Yeah, it's all one big water slide, basically, for Donald Trump towards, he believes, the nomination and facing off with Joe Biden. He's trying to consolidate Republicans behind him at this point, basically arguing that if you're not with him in his legal struggles, you're not with him politically, and therefore you're with the opposition. In this otherwise newsless hour-long interview, Donald Trump kind of threw down the gauntlet to Republicans on a show many of them watch to be with him now or be perceived as against him later. Here's what he said.
Republicans can't let them get away with it. The Republicans have to be tough. The Republicans are great in many ways, but they don't fight as hard for this stuff, and they have to get a lot tougher. And if they don't, they're not going to have much of a Republican Party.
Hallie, is a pretty familiar refrain there from the former president. Part call for loyalty, kind of part warning that you got to be with him now. He used this very effectively after the New York indictment and really never looked back in terms of polling in the primary.
Well, this runs us right into next week's debate. It's going to be next Wednesday. We'll have special coverage, of course, right here on NBC News Now. But based on what we know on the debate stage, you will not see Donald Trump, at least from the signals that we're getting. However, there is as you well know, the spin room. You know, he's going to have some allies in and around the event. Representatives Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, Byron Donalds, as well as Kari Lake. We're also learning more tonight about how some of these other candidates plan to take him on or not, how they plan to talk about him if he is absent.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for all of these candidates, figuring out whether they're debating with or without Donald Trump is going to require a huge strategic shift one way or the other to be prepared. One of the things that we're learning about today, thanks to a posting online, is how Ron DeSantis is thinking about handling this. He took an unusual step here in which his super PAC, prohibited from directly communicating with the campaign, just posted their debate memo on the website of one of the members of the super PAC leadership team so that Ron DeSantis and his team could read it, but so could we. And what we learned is that DeSantis' strategy here is to defend Donald Trump in absentia and to try to basically, in the words of this memo, take a sledgehammer to Vivek Ramaswamy, who's kind of crept up into a second or third place close to DeSantis in some of these polls. Expect to see DeSantis then sort of try to act as Trump's wingman in absentia to the degree he can. And to the degree he attacks him, it's kind of by throwing some shade, basically saying, Trump's too weak to defend himself, let me do it now, and then try to turn on Christie, Ramaswamy, and these other candidates to at least shore up his second place position, although it's hard for me to imagine how that does much to move him towards first, which is ostensibly the goal of running for president.
Isn't there kind of another risk here, Garrett? Does not DeSantis run the risk of potentially elevating Ramaswamy if he does keep going after him?
Yeah, I think that's right. Although in conservative circles, Ramaswamy's already pretty well elevated himself. I mean, he's not a national figure by any real sense right now, but if you watch Fox News all day long, he's on there all the time. So he's out there, and I think the DeSantis people, or at least his super PAC, have clearly made the calculation he needs to be dealt with. If this sounds familiar, this is how we ended up in the situation that the Republican Party ended up in 2016, where a whole bunch of people were fighting for second place to be the Trump alternative, while Donald Trump skated to the Republican nomination. You're starting to see the hints of a similar development or a similar strategy appearing here in 2024.
I know we'll be talking about that much more in the days to come. Garrett Haake in our next episode of Where in the World is Garrett Tonight. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being with us. So breaking news now into us. A judge in Delaware is formally dismissing the tax charges against President Biden's son, Hunter. But here's what this new filing actually does. It lets the special counsel file new charges in a different district. Remember, that's after that plea deal with federal prosecutors fell apart with the president's son. Tom Winter is joining us now to explain. And just to sort of gut check and plain English it, Tom, two things we love here on the show. This was pretty much the expected move. This is not a surprise, but it is significant because of what it lets the special counsel do now.
Not only was it the expected move, Hallie, but it was the move that prosecutors had to make. The very first thing they have to prove at trial is that there's some sort of a nexus to the jurisdiction that they plan on, that they are bringing the charges in. And that was not the case in Delaware. They even said that, look, bringing this here would be a kind of a fallacy. There's just no way we can bring this case forward since that plea deal that you referenced fell apart. So what can the special counsel do now? They are free to charge Hunter Biden on these specific charges or other specific charges in any other district that they feel like they have that venue, that nexus to. And the most likely places for that are going to be the Central District of California, based in L.A., where Hunter Biden was living at the time. The other option is the D.C. area. There's some potential ties there. And so they have a decision to make, really, in the coming couple of months as to whether or not they want to bring these tax charges. Separate are that pretrial diversion agreement and the idea of a potential gun charge. The judge has not made a determination as to whether or not that is in effect, so that's something that still needs to be worked out. She's accepted the withdrawal of Hunter Biden's attorney, Chris Clark, freeing him up to potentially testify about the plea negotiations to help better inform her as to whether or not she wants to dismiss that as well. So we need to wait and see whether or not she orders up a hearing and everybody's back in court. But the tax charges against Hunter Biden, as expected, as you alluded to, Hallie, have now been formally dismissed.
Tom Winter, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Tonight, the migrant crisis affecting the southern border is now taking a toll further north, with the mayor of New York City demanding more help from the feds. He says the city's not getting it.
We're not getting the answers we need from the federal government, and we're constantly playing catch up on those who are coming in, and a large number of them are children with families.
Cities in the Northeast are seeing a ton of migrants arrive on buses sent from some of those southern border states. 2 busloads, for example, just arrived in Philadelphia in just the last 24 hours. More are expected in New York in the coming days. The crisis now hitting some New York City hotspots. The famous restaurateur Danny Meyer, he founded Shake Shack and a bunch of other places. He's announcing he's going to have to shut down 2 restaurants because the hotel they're in is being used to shelter migrants. He says in a statement that while they admire and respect the hotel's decision to house migrants, it essentially leaves them short on paying customers. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez is covering this one for us. Explain how this crisis is growing, both locally and federally. And even if the numbers federally tell a different story, I think, than what New York is seeing. Explain that.
Yeah, Hallie. So, look, it's not just New York State. It's also Massachusetts. Earlier this month, the governor there declared a state of emergency. Other cities, you mentioned Philadelphia, are also seeing an influx as well. And while the federal government has seen a slight dip in numbers of illegal border crossings since the end of Title 42, that COVID-era public health restriction that made it easier for the government to expel migrants, the numbers have dropped a bit on the southern border, but major cities across the country are dealing with this influx. You're looking at video there outside of the iconic iconic Roosevelt Hotel here in Midtown Manhattan that is now housing hundreds of migrants. As you heard, the city's mayor, Eric Adams, says the federal government is not doing enough. There's been a bit of a spat between him and the governor now, both Democrats, of course, but the governor's lawyer sent a letter to city officials saying that they have not been proactive enough and have not taken the state's assistance as much as they should have. Both leaders now downplaying that rift, but we have been speaking with migrants outside of the Roosevelt Hotel, and they say while they are grateful for the assistance that they've been getting, it is very difficult to get work permits here. Take a listen.
Well, I can't say no or yes because we are immigrants and the government is helping us. The mayor helps us immigrants a lot, but immigrants too, we should be conscious and work. That's why we came here.
And New York City hitting a new milestone, Hallie. More than 100,000 migrants arriving here since last year. 58,000 or so of them are in shelters, and city officials estimate that this will cost city taxpayers some $12 billion by the summer of 2025, Hallie.
Gabe Gutierrez, thank you very much for that reporting, as always. In just the last few hours, a judge in Mississippi is declaring a mistrial in the case of two white men accused of chasing and shooting at a black FedEx driver last year. The reason? The key witness, who is a police detective on the case, said under oath he didn't hand over key evidence.
In 17 years, I don't think I've ever seen it happen, but it happened here. And with great reluctance, the court has no choice in this matter but to grant the motion for a mistrial.
So that's the judge declaring the mistrial, and you heard family members of 25-year-old Monterio Gibson getting very upset in court today when they heard this. That was Gibson's mom, you heard. She ended up walked out of court. Last year, Gibson had been in a van making FedEx deliveries when prosecutors say Gregory Case used a pickup truck to block Gibson's van from leaving. Then Case's son allegedly came out with a gun and shot at Gibson as he was trying to go. Gibson was not hurt. A lawyer for Gregory Case says his client was worried when he saw a van outside his mother-in-law's home and went to go check it out. Danny Savalos is joining us now. And Danny, this case has drawn attention because, in part, it has comparisons to the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, the black man who was shot and killed by three white men while running through a Georgia neighborhood. Obviously, circumstances different here, and you have it ending in a mistrial. Talk about the circumstances that led up to this.
So it appears that it was the police and not the prosecutors. The police failed to turn over a statement, a recording, to prosecutors who, of course, could not have turned over that which they didn't know they had to the defense. Now, the rules of discovery in Mississippi and elsewhere require turning over in discovery certain things. Discovery is more limited in criminal cases than civil cases, and not all discovery disputes are clear-cut, but it's pretty clear that if you have a recorded statement of a potential victim, that's the kind of thing, in the spirit of discovery, that must be turned over to the other side. Now, here's the interesting thing. The defense asked for the mistrial, and they got it. Ordinarily, the rule is when they ask, if it's granted, double jeopardy does not apply. That means this case can be brought again.
An attorney for Gibson later saying in a statement for the family that their family feels frustrated that the mistrial represents a delay in justice. So as you talk about the idea that this wouldn't constitute double jeopardy, would it be likely that there would be another case brought here?
That decision by the prosecution is always a political and resource-driven decision. In other words, do they have the money to bring it again? Do they have the resources? And do they want to bring it? Is it a case that they think will result in more egg on their face than they obviously already have in this case? So it's always a personality decision. It's always a judgment call by the elected DA or the appointed prosecutor. And so there's really no clear way to tell at this moment. But all indications are this appears to be a case that would be likely to be brought again.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much. Police in North Dakota tonight sharing new body camera footage showing the moments an ambush happened that left one police officer dead and two other officers and a bystander hurt. It's an attack police say could have been so much worse if officers hadn't responded the way they did. We're going to show you the footage once. It may be difficult to watch. We should also note that Fargo police blurred out some graphic parts of this.
Central, shots fired. Shots fired. We got 3 officers down.
You hear the phrase, we have 3 officers down. You heard the officers and the shooter firing back and forth. Police say Mohammed Barakat shot dozens of rounds. He was eventually shot and killed himself. Police say an investigation is still happening. We'll keep you posted as we learn more. So some new data is raising some concerns about a late summer COVID surge with hospitalizations for the virus going up across the country. Now, listen, the numbers are still very far from the worst days of the pandemic. But look at this. It's still a spike, right? Kansas and Vermont see admissions to the hospitals up something like 140% plus. You've also got the numbers up in Georgia, Rhode Island, Mississippi, and elsewhere coast to coast. Nationally, the average, 20% more people are getting admitted to the hospital with COVID than they were 2 weeks ago. It's happening as health officials say a new variant is dominating these cases. This variant is called EG5. But there's a new booster rolling out in the fall that they say could provide some protection against this thing. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Natalie Azar is joining us now. So I think we can't stress enough the context here. This spike is nothing compared to what we've seen in the past, right? When pandemic hospitalizations were way up. There were 10,000 hospitalizations in the last week of July, but 150,000 we saw 1 week back in January, right? So we are not in the darkest days of the pandemic. However, this is, right, flashing forward to whatever our new normal is, I think a surge that I will tell you, even just anecdotally, I think a lot of people are talking about because a lot of people are hearing about it and hearing about, I can just tell you, daycares, that are seeing COVID cases rip through classrooms, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think we also have like a little PTSD, right, about prior surges and how horrible it was. And I think nobody wants to go back there. And I think the way you sort of said it in the lead is the right way to think about it, Hallie. The absolute numbers are not overly concerning, but it's the trend that we're following. And that's what we're really kind of keeping an eye on. Look, we have a convergence of things that's happening right now. We have waning immunity. Many of us haven't had a booster in close to a year. We have new strains that probably have a transmission advantage over prior ones. And we just are coming towards the end of a summer where a lot of people were traveling and mixing and everything. So these bump in hospitalizations really aren't that surprising. Sadly, again, for older folks and people who are immunocompromised, that's kind of the group that is the most vulnerable. Kind of what we thought in the beginning, right? When COVID first happened, we kind of said it's like flu. If you're older, you're more vulnerable. I still think we're going to ride this out. We have antivirals. We have a new booster coming, but it's something that we need to be following closely.
Talk more about that new booster coming this fall. We know that some people get vaccinated. Some people did not get the boosters. Only about 17% of people have actually had them. What's your advice? What's your expectation? Those might be two different things.
Yeah, you know what? I think the enthusiasm is probably going to be pretty lackluster. We don't have a really great track record for flu vaccination in this country. About 50% of eligible people get the flu shot every year. If we get to that with COVID, I would be really, really surprised. I have a feeling the CDC is probably going to make a recommendation. We did reach out to the CDC director who spoke with Ann Thompson earlier tonight. They're probably going to make a recommendation that anyone who's eligible get it. But I have a feeling it's going to be one of those case by cases, Hallie. That's what I'm doing in the office right now. I'm not telling everyone that I think they need it, but certainly my patients who are immunocompromised and older, I do absolutely want them vaccinated with the booster this year, Hallie.
Dr. Natalie Azar, thank you so much. We'll see how that goes come the fall. Appreciate it. Coming up, new details tonight about that Marine charged with sexual assault of a minor. What we're learning now about how he apparently met that missing 14-year-old girl found in his barracks. Plus, a terrifying moment in Malaysia after a plane crashed onto a highway. We've got that later this hour. New questions tonight about the people who lead our country in Congress after a couple very recent, very public incidents turning up the heat on conversations about age and cognitive ability. Now, in a new NBC News exclusive from Montana, Democratic Senator Jon Tester is making very clear where he stands.
We saw what happened with Senator McConnell. There's obviously the issues with Senator Feinstein. The population of the U.S. Senate is not getting any younger. How should that be addressed? And is it something that you and your colleagues need to be a little more forceful about?
I think it needs to be addressed by the voters.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the last thing I want to have happen is stay there too long. I've watched it happen too many times in my time in the Senate.
Yeah.
And it's a pitiful thing to watch. We're really good people, both sides of the aisle. Really, really good people have stellar careers in public service really deteriorate to the point where they're just a a shell of what they former were. But the voters know that. The voters know that. They can see what I can see. I don't, they know. And so they'll have to make that decision when the time comes.
You'll remember last month, Senator Dianne Feinstein, who's 90 years old and in her 5th term in office, seemed to need help casting a vote during a committee markup. Her staff saying the markup was chaotic and the senator was preoccupied. Then there was Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, of course, who froze mid-sentence in a news conference last month. He was led away. His staff said McConnell was feeling lightheaded. He later came back and took some questions. He's 81 years old and in a record 7th term. Ryan Nobles is joining us now. So, Ryan, I have to tell you, it is rather extraordinary to hear a sitting senator talking in part about someone in his own party and referring to people who deteriorate to the point where they're a shell of what they formerly were. I mean, again, we said he made clear where he stands. That is very clear.
Yeah, there's no doubt that he was honest about his assessment of what he's seen play out in front of him. And we obviously asked in the context of Senator Feinstein and Senator McConnell, but he's been around for other examples of members of the Senate who've also been in similar circumstances and stayed perhaps longer than some thought they should. But what I was most struck by was his solution to this problem. He doesn't think it's something that he should have a role in telling another senator when they should step down, that he thinks it should be left up to the voters and that the decision should be made at the ballot box. I even pressed him on the idea of whether or not term limits were responsible and something that should be considered in the legislature. And he said that the institutional knowledge that is gained by people that spend, quite a bit of time here outweighs the negative outcome of people that stay too long. So he definitely views it as a problem, but one that he doesn't think should be his responsibility, at least to fix as a member of the Senate, that it should be up to the voters.
Well, but pull back and talk about this push-pull on the idea of term limits, whether there's any energy behind something like that. And what you often hear, because I've heard it too, in years of people suggesting things like term limits for people in Congress or whatever, the idea of institutional knowledge, that does have value, right? Like, especially in a building where tradition matters, tradition counts. That's how some of these processes actually happen, the functions of government. Do you get the sense, Ryan, especially based on some of these recent incidents that we've seen, that there is any increased appetite for talking about term limits? It's this sort of situation where the people who would put term limits in place are the ones who would stand to lose the most by then not having a job because of those term limits.
Now, you hit the nail right on the head, and the answer to the question is there's just no energy in that direction. It's not something they even want to entertain. And I do think, particularly at the federal level, and the Senate is the best example of this, it's a complex institution. The parliamentary rules can make your head spin. And for a lot of these members, it takes a term or two before they really get a handle on how the process works. But we should also point out that the Senate is a 6-year term. It's the longest term of any federal office outside of the judicial courtships. And so, you get elected to a 3rd term. You've been here for a really long time. And a lot of these folks don't get into this business until they're in their 50s or 60s. So as a result, they end up being here for a long time. But there's no doubt that age is something that is just looming over this body. I mean, I joked with Senator Tester, he's going to be 66 in the not too distant future. And he ranks among the youngest members of the Senate right now.
Well, you talk about, Ryan, it's a factor at the Capitol, but it's not just there. You go down Pennsylvania Avenue, and of course, conservative critics have raised concerns, raised questions, they think, about President Biden's age. You asked Senator Tester about that, and I think it's important to explain the backdrop to people of this question, too. This is a senator, one of the key moderates that we're watching here come this next cycle because of the very interesting political position that he holds in a state like Montana. So talk us through how he responded to your sort of queries about President Biden on this issue.
Yeah, it's interesting because President Biden lost his state by a pretty significant number in 2020, and now they're going to be on the ballot at the same time if everything plays out the way that we think it's going to in 2024. So there is every opportunity for him to find some distance between Joe Biden and himself. And the question of Biden's age and capacity, it's something that Republicans are continually hammering. This is how Tester responded to questions about that very topic.
Joe Biden, when I've been around him, and that's not every day, but when I've been around him, when I've seen him on the news, he's absolutely 100% with it. And he's got his recall, his cognitive ability, whatever you want to call it. I'm not a doc, I'm a dirt farmer, but he's fine, and he's doing a good job.
And what's interesting about this, Hallie, keep in mind, is that there's a frame of reference here for Jon Tester. Not only has he worked with Joe Biden in his current form as president, but he served with him here in the United States Senate, so he knows what he was and what he is now, and he still believes that he has the capacity to do the job. This is not a politically easy position for him to take, given the lack of popularity for Joe Biden in Montana. But Tester's big, takeaway from our talk with him is that he's going to be who he is, and he's not going to be worried about the political considerations, because that is what's won him elections in Montana so many times before.
Ryan Nobles, live for us there in Washington after getting boots on the ground out in Montana. Ryan, thank you. Great reporting. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, we are learning a 6th person has died days after that horrific home explosion in Pennsylvania. It's still not clear what happened. Officials had said the owners were having issues with their hot water tank. A local DA says the fire marshal thinks it may have been an accident. The whole thing is still under investigation. Number 2, a U.S. Marine detained weeks ago after a 14-year-old was found at his barracks at Camp Pendleton is now charged with sexual assault of a minor. The Marine's lawyers say he met the girl on Tinder. The girl's grandmother reported her missing in June, and police say she's run away before. Number 3, the founder of the Hillsong megachurch was found not guilty today of covering up his father's sexual abuse. His dad confessed decades ago to sexually assaulting a young boy, and officials in Australia said the son didn't report what his dad did. He said the victim didn't want police to find out, and the court said he had a reasonable excuse for not telling officials. Number 4, the use of cannabis, hallucinogenics, alcohol, all-time highs among Americans 35 to 50 years old last year. That's according to new findings from the National Institutes of Health. The study shows marijuana and hallucinogen use was also going up for people between the ages of 19 to 30. Vaping hit record levels with that group, too. Number 5, check this out. These are some endangered anteater scales that officials in Thailand say they seized. They say people tried to illegally take more than a ton of scales worth more than $1 million out of the country. They're used in traditional Chinese medicine. They have keratin in them. 2 suspects were arrested. When we come back, prices this holiday season could go way up. What it has to do with the big delay happening right now in the Panama Canal, that's next in tonight's Original. Plus, the coach of the U.S. women's soccer team stepping down after the team's historically early exit from the World Cup. Heartbreaking exit. What he's saying on his way out. NBA star James Harden just sold out 10,000 bottles of his wine in seconds, but not in the U.S. We'll tell you where later in the Global. But first, tonight's Original with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And for this, gang, the holidays are creeping closer. I know it's still August, but, get ready, because those ornaments and everything else are going to be hitting store shelves pretty soon. However, delays happening right now down south in the Panama Canal could add some digits to your holiday shopping bill. That's because there's more than 100 ships just waiting to get through, sitting there, because new restrictions put in place are limiting how many of those ships can actually get through this really important waterway. Why? Climate change. That's triggered a drought, meaning water levels have dropped. That's the issue. Guad Venegas explains.
The Western Hemisphere's most important canal and the lake it sits on need fresh water. A drought affecting Panama's Gatun Lake means less water is available to operate the Panama Canal, forcing administrators to reduce the number of ships passing through.
We are managing water resources and waiting for some rainfall to come.
And why does this matter? With 40% of all U.S. container traffic coming through the canal, any delays will hit American consumers. And if things continue, it could mean pricier holiday presents this year.
You picture everything you can buy in our superstore are on the ships generally, but the cargo that's going to be more restricted is heavy stuff. You have sometimes machinery, sporting goods, home lighting, home equipment, refrigerators, all that kind of stuff.
The new restrictions come after more than 150 ships were already waiting to cross last week, much more than the usual 90 vessels. Those that do cross are required to wait less, and the wait time to get through the locks now could be as long as 3 weeks. It's also prompted some companies to find alternate shipping options, but those could be more expensive.
It'll be more if your container is forced to be unloaded in California, for example, and then railed across the country to the U.S. East Coast. That's where you would have maybe bought it for X dollars, and then it's going to be X plus 30% or X plus 40%.
Anything coming from East Asia could also go through the Suez Canal in Egypt, which would mean a longer voyage. That canal also bringing back memories of another traffic jam 2 years ago.
There's a new plan to free that massive cargo ship wedged in the Suez Canal.
That 6-day jam delaying tens of billions of dollars in goods, and it happened just as supply chains across the globe started straining, leading to a surge in inflation. Although Panama's situation isn't an emergency, things there could get worse before they get better. The canal's meteorology manager saying the high temperatures in the Pacific due to El Nino have increased evaporation in the lake and led to a weaker rainy season. Its administrator telling CNBC global warming could have real ripple effects on shipping and the worldwide economy.
We believe that climate change is going to impose significant increase in costs and transportation costs in general.
Guad Venegas is joining us now live. So, Guad, what's the solve on this? Just more rain?
Well, Hallie, if it does rain, which is not the forecast right now, then the levels would go back to normal, and then the canal could operate at its normal capacity. But the forecast indicates this could extend. If it extends through the end of the summer, that means the companies, as we mentioned in the story, have those two options. One is they can go through the Suez Canal, which would take longer, so we could see shortages, or they could go to California. But we heard the experts say that would make it more expensive. And we just got news that those restrictions, which were, by the way, originally imposed through August 21st, have now been extended through the end of the month, all through September 2nd. And most likely they will keep extending them unless the drought ends. Hallie.
Guad Venegas, thank you very much for bringing this one to our attention. Appreciate it. Coming up, the world's top chess federation is changing who can compete in some matches. We'll tell you why and why there's so much controversy about it. Plus, officials think dozens of people have been killed after a boat capsized off the Cape Verde coast. How it happened later in the local. A new wrinkle tonight in the controversy about trans women competing in sports. But the latest organization banning them? Not one you might expect. Not even really a sport at all. It's chess. Starting next week, the world's top chess federation will not let transgender women compete in its official events for women until what they're calling further analysis. That's something that could take up to 2 years in some cases. The National Center for Transgender Equality saying this move is insulting to cis women, trans women, and to the game itself. NBC News has reached out to the International Chess Federation for comment, but we have not yet heard back. Maura Barrett is covering this story for us. She is joining us now. Maura, we have talked a lot about the controversy over the banning of trans women athletes from sports like involving the banning of trans women athletes from sports like swimming, for example. Chess is different. There's not a physicality to chess because that is what officials have argued previously, that it had to do with physical differences between male and female athletes here. Talk us through the rationale from the Chess Federation.
Yeah, the lack of physicality in the game of chess is why this announcement is coming off as very confusing because, as you know, or anyone that's been around chess, it's more of a game of brain power. And so the International Chess Federation is trying to offer some sort of explanation, talking about the differences in the categories of men and women in which players compete. And so they wrote in their new regulations that change of gender is a change that has made a significant impact on a player's status and future eligibility to tournaments. Therefore, it can only be made if there's relevant proof of the change provided. Now, a spokesperson elaborated that the, quote, absence of regulations previously, given all of the other anti-trans legislation that we've been seeing, has caused ambiguity when registering trans players to compete. And so this is something that they're seeing happening in other sports and trying to follow suit. But as we talked about, it doesn't really line up the same way. And what's more, even with this new regulation, there's different rules when it comes to trans men versus trans women. So there's a lot of confusion and, as you can expect, criticism swirling around this announcement, Hallie.
So what about the future of competitions? There's been some question marks around that, especially because the rules are different for trans men and trans women a little bit.
Yeah, and we heard directly from chess players who are ready to compete at this international level today. I want to show you a tweet from Yosha Iglesias. She's a chess master internationally and a French coach. She's also a trans woman, talking about how she doesn't even know if she's able to compete in the French championship in just 3 days. And we also should point out that there is a big difference in the policy with trans men and trans women. Basically, the new policy says that any women's titles currently held by trans male competitors must be abolished and can be transferred to a general title, but if a trans male competitor wants to change their gender back to a woman, they can get those women's titles renewed. But it's a different situation if you're a trans woman. And so that's where the point of contention comes, and a lot of critics calling out potential sexism and concern about whether women are taken seriously in the sport overall, Hallie.
Maura Barrett, thank you very much. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it's tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our foreign desk has done it for you. Here are some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. In Cape Verde, dozens of migrants are believed to be dead after the Coast Guard rescued just 38 people from a migrant boat. Officials said the boat left Senegal about a month ago with more than 100 people on board. A spokesperson for the UN International Organization of Migration tells NBC News at least 7 people were found dead. It's not clear where exactly the boat was headed. In Malaysia, officials say this small plane lost control and crashed into a highway this morning, killing all 6 people in the plane and 2 people on the ground. Officials said the plane was about to land at a nearby airport when it veered off course and crashed. Investigators are now searching for the black box to figure out what happened. And in China, fans leaving NBA star James Harden is stunned after they bought thousands of bottles of his wine super fast. Harden was out promoting the brand on a live stream with an influencer who told viewers, hey, start buying bottles when I say go. 14 seconds later, when they said stop, turns out fans had ordered something like 10,000 bottles. Harden is like, oh, what? He does a little cartwheel at one point. He says he usually only sells a few cases in a day. Head coach of the U.S. women's national soccer team resigning tonight after the team was eliminated at the World Cup and after some criticism over the way he coached them. Think about this, right? The women's team goes into this tournament as favorites to win the whole thing, despite the fact that no team has ever won 3 World Cup tournaments in a row. Still, they were definitely a favorite to at least make it to the championship. Instead, what happened? Their earliest elimination in tournament history. They only scored 4 goals. They only won 1 game. So what's the coach saying now? Our Molly Hunter has more.
Less than 2 weeks after the U.S. women's national team crashed out of the World Cup, their worst performance ever, head coach Vlatko Andonovski is out. In a statement, U.S. Soccer announcing his resignation, Andonovski calling the job the honor of his life, adding he's very optimistic for the future of this program. He echoed that emotion in his final World Cup press conference.
I want to be there for them. You know, I love them. I love them all. And, you know, they're my players, but they're my friends.
The move was expected after the U.S. was knocked out in the round of 16, a loss that came down to a millimeter in penalty kicks.
It's painful. It hurts. It's going to hurt.
But the problems didn't start at this World Cup as the world catches up, ending the era of American dominance. After the loss, Andonovski was asked directly about his future.
It's emotional. It is hard. So I haven't really had a chance to think about me. I don't even want to think about me.
In the interim, current assistant coach Twyla Kilgore will take over. And with under a year until the Olympics, U.S. Soccer and the players on this young team have their work cut out for them. Molly Hunter, NBC News.
Our thanks to Molly Hunter for that reporting. We've got some news coming into us in just the last couple of minutes. The State Department saying it's aware of reports that an American citizen in Russia has been charged with espionage. Those reports are coming in from Russian state media, who identify this man as Gene Spector. They say he was already serving time in the country on bribery charges dating back to 2022. Spector has not been labeled as wrongfully detained by the State Department. Keep in mind, that's a designation they've used most recently for Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who remains in Russia. More to come on that story as we get it, and more to come here on this show, including the big new focus in this space race, why the moon's south pole is becoming so important. Coming up. We got some more breaking news for you out of Washington here. At the top of the show, we told you that former President Trump's team was facing a deadline to say when they want his federal trial to start on those charges he interfered with the country's election in 2020? Well, we now know what he wants. They're saying April 2026 would be a fair start because they claim that that's how long the government got to investigate, 2+ years. Remember, Jack Smith wants a January 2nd, 2024 start to the trial as he accuses Mr. Trump of illegally trying to overturn his loss in the 2020 election. We've got more details on that coming up here on NBC News Now as our coverage continues. But right now, some other news, too, on the space race, if you will. A Russian robot, as we speak, is orbiting the moon and will for another 4 days before it touches down to become the first mission to ever land on the south pole of the moon. It's a moment, right? It's like an international space race moment because this race keeps getting bigger and more competitive. As we speak, India has its own moon lander that's also getting close to the South Pole. And over the next few years, both the U.S. and China will launch manned missions that they hope will actually land astronauts there. Tom Costello is joining us now. Context check. It's hard to get to the South Pole of the moon, right?
Yeah, it's rocky, it's remote, it's dark, it's cold, but it's icy. And ice is what is all about right now. That is the jackpot. And that's why Russia has sent up Luna 25. Now, this is about its first mission to the moon that Russia has launched in nearly 50 years. They've never put cosmonauts on the moon, but this is, of course, a robotic lander. Take a look at the checklist, and you see right there, Luna 25 lifting off about 10 days ago or so, entering orbit, landing on the 21st, and then running experiments. They want to know for sure, is that ice? Is it water? If it is, they can potentially, and NASA could potentially, use that water to then one day use it as fuel to go on to Mars.
The space race, right? The kind of new space race. So Russia wins by getting the lander on there first. Obviously, if it lands on the 21st as expected. But is it a bigger deal if the U.S., let's say, gets there first with actual people, with astronauts?
Well, I got to tell you, NASA Chief Bill Nelson has been very, very hawkish on this. And he just said to me in an interview a couple of days ago, he thinks it's critical that NASA and the international bodies that are part of our space effort get there first, because he is afraid that China will literally get there and say, we're here first, and then lock everybody else out. Yeah. And that would be a strategic, real problem for the world, especially if we want to use that water as rocket fuel to go on to Mars one day. A lunar base is critical as part of NASA's plans to go on beyond the moon. It's also part of China's plans, part of Russia's plans, and oh, by the way, guess who's working together to build their own space base on the moon? China and Russia.
Our thanks to Tom Costello for that. More coverage with Top Story right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.